Hey, it's Matt with 2A Cops, and I am out here today in the garage with something that's totally not gun related. Well, mostly. Okay, no. You guys have seen this car in the videos in the past. This is a 1967 Ford Country Squire. Other than the paint and body, I built the entire car, suspension, engine. I didn't build the transmission, but I did convert it from a automatic from a C6 to a 5-speed TKX manual transmission. I built the motor, I did everything on the engine other than the actual machine work on the block. Rear end, new rear end gears, it's been converted to a 4-link. Factory, this car was originally a 3-link, so now it's a 4-link. It does have a pan hard rod. It's got 4-wheel disc brakes, Willwoods, front and rear. And I have been fighting the carburetor on this thing since I built it. I can get the jetting running perfect, and then the temperature changes, and then it screws my jetting all up. So rather than rejetting my car every 6 months when the weather changes, or actually every 4 months when the weather changes here in Idaho, I decided to take the step and switch this thing over to electronic fuel injection. I did some research. This kit by Summit Racing has been around about 7 years now, it seems like. All the reviews were mostly good. There was a couple of them in there that people had problems with the injectors failing, but the nice thing about this system is it uses standard injectors. So if the injectors for this fail, you can swap them out. You don't have to send the whole throttle body in. I know with the Holly Sniper, that has been an issue where if something on it goes wrong, you gotta send the whole thing in. So this is electronic fuel injection. It does require a wideband O2 sensor, which I already have because I'm already running a wideband O2 air fuel ratio gauge in the car. So I've already got that. That makes that part easy. The one thing I don't have that I had to get is an electronic fuel pump. So the recommended parts from Summit, there's a couple of them. You need 58 PSI of fuel, constant fuel pressure. Mechanical fuel pumps aren't gonna put that out. So I've got an electronic fuel pump here. I've got the filter / regulator here that'll send, and it's got a return line that will send anything over 58 PSI back to the fuel tank. My fuel tank doesn't have a return line. So I'm gonna have to drop the fuel tank out of this and add a return line to it. So I've already ordered the little bung that I got to attach or insert into the tank. A lot of other cars out there, more popular cars than station wagons, you can actually buy a drop-in fuel tank that has an electronic in the tank fuel pump that has a return line built into it. I wish I had that option. I can't even buy a replacement fuel tank for this thing for a regular carbureted version, let alone a drop-in fuel injection one. So I will be modifying the fuel tank that's in here that has already been repaired once because it actually was leaking in the past. So, first step is going to be to get in here and yank that carburetor out of there. I should talk about my channel sponsors. Boise Black Rifles, the longest running channel sponsor here at 2A Cops. So, big thanks to them. Other than paying my paycheck so that I could buy parts, they did not have much to do with the filming of this video. Aegis Gun Care. On my firearms, I use nothing but their lube and cleaner. Fantastic product. If you own suppressors, you should really look at their suppressor cleaning system. If you're a gun store, you definitely want one. They're a little expensive for an individual owner, but from a gun store standpoint, they will save you a ton of time if you end up cleaning suppressors for people. And the last and not least channel sponsor is going to be Lawson Watch Company. If you like classic firearms, you like classic things in general, you will love Lawson watches. They are a mechanical automatic watch, and the company is owned by a military vet who is as pro-gun, pro-America as I am, and they make a damn gorgeous watch. So if you are a watch guy, definitely give them a look. If you are a conservative, you might want to consider following them on social media because they are the watch company that knows what time it is. Additionally, since it's not gun related, I'm actually allowed to give out a discount code. So if you use 2A Cops at Loss and Watch, you will save 10%. So one thing I did have to do was I had to change out my distributor. I was running Summit Racing's magnetic pickup distributor, their store brand one. Part of the thing with the fuel injection, Summit Racing's brand fuel injection, is it needs a coil with 1.5 ohms of resistance or better. The coil that was compatible with Summit Racing's brand distributor had to be 0.7 ohms. So the two were not compatible. So I've swapped out and I went, unfortunately, back to Pertronics. I bought one of their cast stock look distributors. I've had some bad luck with Pertronics recently. Hopefully this one, they've resolved their issues. Both of the problems I had were during COVID, so I'm hoping that was the issue. A lot of businesses were having problems during COVID. This is hopefully a post-COVID distributor. But I did have a distributor go bad on me, and I had one of their coils go bad on me. I've been using Pertronics for decades in cars, and thought they were a safe brand to go with. And unfortunately have had two of them, and it was like within 2 weeks of each other fail. So giving it another shot. So here we go, real basic. I'm not gonna make you watch any of this. I'm gonna rip the carburetor off of there, and then we're gonna start looking at what I need to do to put fuel injection on here. Another thing I'm gonna be doing while I'm in here is I'm taking the mechanical fuel pump off. I got a block off plate over there to get rid of that. So stand by, or stand by to stand by, as I like to say. All right, so here we are a couple minutes later. Here's the carburetor that was on there. This is a Holley Brawler, so it's their generic brand, but it's actually from Holley. And I'm leaking gas all over. This is a 750 vacuum secondary. This is what I've been running on this car, but now this thing is all ready to go for fuel injection. I gotta find a place to put this. All right, the other part of taking this stuff off was the original mechanical fuel pump. This is not a factory Ford mechanical fuel pump. This is a Holley high volume fuel pump. That is now off. All right, so if we get down in here, you can see on the side of the timing cover there, that hole and the two studs sticking out. That is where the fuel pump used to live and where this is going to now live. This is nothing fancy, just a chrome plated piece of steel that is a fuel pump block off plate. All right. So as I already mentioned, here's the old carburetor. I've dumped all the gas out of it. By old carburetor, I mean it's 2 years old. So now it's time to open up the fuel injection. So this is obviously a little more complicated than a carburetor. Like, my carburetor doesn't need any of that. However, once installed, as long as I do it properly, the drivability is going to be much better. It will automatically adjust the jetting as needed. It may not have the same romp on the gas pedal, full-on power that a carbureted vehicle does. There we go. Oh, nice. Knocked my lights down. All right, take two. Let's see here. Let me get all this junk out of the way. Wideband sensor, the dash display, the computer, because yes, it's going to require a computer. And this is probably the water temp sensor and an adapter. All right, that is all out. Let's see if I can get this throttle body out of here. Make sure there's nothing else in the box. All right, so if you want to compare size-wise, there's the original carburetor. There's the fuel injection. Big difference in size. This is going to hide underneath the air conditioner. It won't look any different than the carburetor did, except you won't see the fuel line going to it. That's about it. Throttle linkage hooks up the same. So, throttle body going on the car. One thing I will say, this is a direct bolt-on for most carbureted vehicles, unless you're still running a factory manifold that has a spread bore carburetor on it. Almost anybody running a performance intake is going to have a square flange intake for a Holley 4150 style carburetor. This is a direct bolt-on for this. They do make it with automatic transmission kickdown brackets for whatever kind of car you need. So if you're running a GM or a Mopar or a Ford and you got an automatic, you can get a setup for that. So I'm going to start reading directions this time. I normally don't do that. And then start bolting things on. Okay, so yesterday, ripped the carburetor off, replaced it with the throttle body. I had to change out a couple of the carburetor studs because they were too short. This has got a thicker flange than the actual carburetor did. Figured out where I'm going to mount some stuff here. Today, one of the things I need to do is to mount the computer that runs the fuel injection system. I had to figure out where I was going to mount that. Then I had to try and route most of the wiring. The wideband O2 sensor on this car is on the passenger side exhaust. I'm mounting the computer over here on the driver's side. It's going to fit kind of underneath the fender here, trying to keep it out of sight. Which thankfully it's a nice small little package, so that's easy enough to do. I've got the wiring routed over to there. I am going to have to tie in a couple of other sensors. I already replaced the water temp sensor. The wiring that goes to the wideband O2 sensor is long enough that it'll reach my current O2 sensor. I'm going to end up adding a second one because I do want to keep my AFR gauge in the car. Additionally, I had to, here, let me get the camera in here. So there's the wiring harness for the computer. The computer's going to fit right under there. The harness runs down under my master cylinder, but over the proportioning valve, around the back of the motor, comes over, and a bunch of it attaches right here onto the throttle body. There's 4 injector wires that need to get hooked up and 3 different sensors. And then my water temp sending unit I had to replace with one that is compatible with this kit. But since I still want to have a water temp gauge, I pulled the plug that was in my thermostat housing here and put my original water temp sending unit there, so I will still have a water temp gauge. And then the wideband O2 sensor wiring comes all the way across the back there, comes down, and you can maybe, no, I don't have any light down there, but it runs into the passenger side exhaust pipe after the collector on the header. I have to connect still ignition wire. This is the main power for the computer. It is not long enough to make it from where I'm planning on mounting the computer over to where my battery is. So I will have to extend this wire, easy enough to do. I have to hook one wire into ignition, which again is easy enough for me to do. I have to tap one into my tack signal, which is the negative terminal on my coil. That's easy enough to do. The hard part is going to be the fuel lines, because like I mentioned earlier, this car does not have a return line for the fuel tank. So my main fuel line used to run all the way up front here to where you can see the fuel pump block off plate that's now there, to where my fuel pump was. So I'm going to terminate it over here, kind of near my master cylinder. I will end up putting a fitting on there that will change that to a -6 AN fitting. From there I will run a hose, which I've got sitting over here, some braided high pressure fuel line hose with some AN fittings on it. I'll run that from the hard line over to the carburetor, and then back underneath the back driver's side quarter panel on the car is where the fuel tank is located in this thing. I'm gonna have to drop that out. I have a fitting right here. It's a bulkhead style fitting that will allow me to put a return line into the tank. I'm gonna have to figure out where I'm gonna locate it because it is tight fitting in there. And then just below that on the frame rails where I'm gonna mount the fuel pump and the pressure regulator slash filter. So that's what I'm working on today. I'm waiting for some more fittings to show up. They're supposed to be here. They were supposed to be here like between 4 and 8 a.m. this morning. It's now been pushed back to maybe 11 a.m., maybe not today. So I was hoping to have this done today. Not looking like it, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, I'm pretty much done up in the engine compartment other than hooking up the fuel line, and I can't cut the front hard metal fuel line yet because I still have my fuel line hooked up to the fuel tank, which is right up in here. You can see up here, here's the metal fuel line with the rubber line that joins the main fuel line to the tank. So what I need to do now, and of course I've got about probably 15 gallons of gas in my gas tank, I need to disconnect that. I'll have to drop my fuel tank down enough to where I can get to the drain plug, drain the tank, and then I'll have to drop the tank down. The problem I'm going to have is I have to put my electric fuel pump below the tank level, which this is obviously not. Over here, I get to below my fuel tank. I have to drop a little bit forward of that because that's where the suspension and stuff all hooks up. But on the inside of the frame rail, under there, let me see if I can get under there with the cell phone camera. All right. So you can see up there where the fuel line comes in, it's right next to my brake line. It drops down and then it runs the full length of the car up to the front where it goes into the engine compartment. So what I'm gonna do is try and cut this right around there, put my fuel pump up there where it's protected. I gotta keep them both up where they are protected because that's the bottom of the car and I don't need to be dragging them on speed bumps or something else. So I've got to do a little bit of work and get this thing going. All right, so gas tank is out. I need to add a fuel return fitting to that. It's not here yet, so I'm kind of stuck on that one. I'll end up doing that when it shows up. But I did get my electric fuel pump installed. So let's take a look here. Before, my fuel line went from the tank down here and it followed that frame rail down. Now you'll notice it kind of is cutting into the middle of the car. So let me get under here. All right. Fuel line comes through up there above the frame rail, drops down here right above my parking brake cables. There's the pre-pump filter. Follow that around. There's the pump. You notice I had to add a little bracket there to the floor because there's not enough flat surface here for me to mount that on. And then the fuel goes right back into the fuel line that I previously showed you that ran along the frame rail. So unfortunately, I'm kind of stuck at this point. I need to mount my pressure regulator / return filter, all that's going to go up front in the engine compartment. I have a a roll of 5/16 metal line coming that I will plumb in here and follow basically the frame rail the way it did before. Up here, that'll be for the return line to the tank. That's going to come from the the filter / regulator up front. Once I mount that up front and get it plumbed back to the tank, plumbing it from that to the carburetor, it's gonna be the last thing I have to do. All my electronics are hooked up. I haven't programmed it, but I just need to plug in the user interface and go through some real basic setup stuff. How many cylinders, what's the displacement, ballpark, what kind of camshaft, and that's it. So hopefully one more day. Oh, I do have to wire my fuel pump, which I've already got the wire run down to the bottom of the car. I just need to run it all the way back to the pump. So again, and that's also going to follow the same line as the same route as the metal fuel lines do. Okay, so last week I got the throttle body installed. I've got the fuel pump installed back there. I still have to mount this fuel filter, pressure regulator up front here, and it has a return line here. So this is not a closed system. It needs a return line to the fuel tank. I mentioned that earlier. This is the gas tank out of this thing. It sits up in the left rear quarter of this vehicle. There is no aftermarket replacement gas tank for this thing. There is no return line from the factory on this gas tank. So what I'm having to do is fit the tank with a return line. What I've got here is a weldless fuel tank return setup. What you do is you drill a 1/2-inch hole. This inserts through the hole. There's a rubber seal there, and then you tighten this down, this bolt down. Let me come closer. Let me scoot down. There we go. So then you tighten the bolt down. You put this into the gas tank. You tighten the bolt down, and this thing works like a rivet nut. So as you tighten this is going to shrink up and expand out, and it will seal around the gas tank. And then I'll be able to hook up a return line to it. In order to do that, I have to drill a hole in the gas tank. If you know anything about gasoline, petrol, if you're British, it's very susceptible to sparks, especially the vapors, not necessarily the gas itself, but the vapors. So the tank has been drained. I've rinsed it out completely twice now with water, washed it out as best I can. But I also need a spot near the top of the tank that I can access, and it needs to be flat. So the only flat surface I have here is when I get down to here, and that's going to be well into the actual gasoline. I would much rather have the vent up higher. I can't put it up here because then it's hitting the top of my fender. What I do have is right here, and if I can get a flat surface here, I'll be able to fit the line on, and then I can have the actual fuel line come up and hit that. So I just need a small flat area, so I am going to smack it with a hammer. I've got a bodywork hammer here to give me a small flat surface here for me to drill and then insert that. And voila, flat surface. That did not take much. So that'll allow me to get that fitting right in there. This is upside down, but it'll sit right about there, which gives me plenty of access to it from the inside of the wheel well. All right. Gas tank is here. I successfully drilled a hole in it without killing myself. No explosions, no fires, no nothing. So that was kind of a nice thing there. So what we've got here, showed you that. It has a rubber seal. There's a little bit of a shoulder right here. Rubber seal fits around that. Put this into the tank, tighten that down. Well, there's that. And of course, my hands are blocking what you're trying to look at. All right, let's see what we got here. It is nice and tight. Yep. And now that that's done, this goes on. This does have an O-ring seal on it. So it appears to be not tapered threads. It just seals with the O-ring. All right, I now have a return line. I'm gonna let this thing sit out here because I had a ton of water flushing through this thing, not only before I drilled the hole, but after. I stuck a magnetic pickup down in there to get as much of the steel shavings from drilling that hole as I could out of there, and then I flushed the tank out a whole bunch more and saw a couple more metal shavings come out of it. I should be nice and clear now. So this thing just needs to dry out. If it was sunny, I would put it outside and let a little solar heat help me, but it's not sunny. All right, got the hard fuel line up here. Let me just record it here. You can see the hard line comes in right where it came in before, center of the screen there. Comes up, hits the fuel pressure regulator / filter. From there, the return line is going to go down. It's not currently in yet. I still have to do that. But then after that, comes up, makes a 90-degree U-turn, or actually a 180-degree U-turn. Comes back around, and the fuel line is now attached to the throttle body. The wiring is all hooked up. My original water temp sensor that was relocated is hooked up. Throttle cable's hooked up. The only thing I need to plumb now is the return line and put the fuel tank back in. Oh, and wire the fuel pump. Should maybe have this thing running here shortly. Okay, fuel lines are all hooked up. I have gone through the initial setup, which you do here on the handheld. You tell it how many cylinders you have, the displacement. They give you a 1 through 4 on your camshaft from mild to wild. Then you tell it what you want your max RPM to be and whether or not you have an electric fan. Oh, and what your aimed idle speed is, engine idle speed. So, did all that, turned the key on. I can hear the electric fuel pump firing up, building up pressure. This system turns it off after 4 seconds unless you're starting the car. So it appears to be all that is working fine. I don't have any fuel leaking anywhere, which is a huge plus coming from a guy who's had an accidental engine fire. Not that you really want to have an intentional engine fire. So it looks like everything's hooked up. I set the throttle cable yesterday with the help of my wife. Just needed somebody to push the gas pedal to the floor so I could set the length of the cable here. Everything's hooked up. So it's going to be a test fire. See what happens. I'm a little nervous. All right, we're in neutral. I'm not going to mess with the clutch or anything. Turn the key on, you'll hear the fuel pump go. Shut off. Let's see what happens when I crank it. All right. As soon as I turned the camera off, of course, the next try it fired a little. See what happens here. I need to turn the idle up a little bit. Okay, so fired. It's starting to figure out. It's starting to learn. It finally got the idle right. Just needs to continue learning. Before I do that, I'm going to lift this car back up, put the rear wheels back on it, clean up the fuel injection lines over at the gas tank before I do that. And then Once I get everything back on, set it back down on the ground, and we'll take it for a test drive. So, stand by to stand by. All right, no leaks on the bottom. There's a little puddle under the car, and I initially started to freak out. It's just the moisture dripping out of the exhaust. So, fuel system's not leaking anywhere that I can see. I am gonna check. There was a shiny spot at one of the fittings on the top of the fuel filter / regulator return thing. So I'm gonna double check that. But at this point, the wheels are back on. It's back on the lift on the ground. Set it down. Love the way this car drives. So here's my thoughts on the Summit Racing, my final thoughts, my overall thoughts. If you are considering doing a fuel injection conversion on your classic car, there's absolutely no reason not to look at Summit's store brand fuel injection. It may not have the same software coverage that the Holly does, but it works very well, and it'll save you a bunch of money over the Holly. So, from the cheap bastard's perspective, definitely worth it. And yeah, this may be a big old boat, but I designed, when I built this thing, my intent was to take it out and autocross it. And it handles way better than it has any right to. Summit Racing store brand fuel injection is definitely worth the money. Especially if you're into more than drag racing. Yes, you can get more power out of a carburetor on the top end. Like this thing does run a little bit flat up the top. It tapers off quicker than my carburetor used to. But I'm talking it in this thing, that's just shy of red line. So that's it. Come back for gun content. I might throw some more car content in there. If you're a regular follower of the channel and you'd like to see more car content, please let me know. I was running a separate car channel, but trying to start a new channel is a nightmare. So if people want to see more car content, I'll probably stick more up on this channel here. So let me know in your comments. If you are a new follower to this channel and you found it because of this car video, don't just jump in and follow me because you like the car content. I'm primarily a gun channel. But as I have discovered after working in a gun store for 5 years now, a huge percentage of gun guys are car guys. So they're like me. They have a thing for mechanical stuff. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, all the expensive hobbies. Man, I like driving this car.